So after transiting the Panama Canal, I was in Panama City, actually in the Pacific Ocean, and my goal all along was to get to the Pacific Ocean with my boat. I'd lived in the Pacific for about 10 years, and I really wanted to get back and see some of the places that I'd visited before. It's really interesting, lots of cultures and natural history, and I just really felt that that's where I wanted to be. So I waited around for a while, but I took off by myself. Unfortunately, I had some problems with the steering and the instrumentation. So I ran into a guy that I had gone through the canal with. His name is Bjorn, and he offered to help me to fix the electronics, and he did that. He's a very competent guy from Germany, and so we decided that he would accompany me on the trip to French Polynesia, about a 40-day voyage. Now, this is a map showing our course. Panama is at the top, and you can see the red crosses. You can notice that you actually go towards the east for a while. Very unusual because you're going to be going towards the west. But we finally got going. The wind was very light. We had a couple passengers, some birds came along. Now, because the wind was light, we used a very light wind sail called a drifter. Now here you see Bjorn is starting to release the drifter. There's something called a sock, this white thing covering the blue sail, the drifter. And as you lift up on the white sock, it releases the sail, and then the wind catches it. And because the wind is very light, the sail is really ideal. So in the beginning, we just used the drifter, and it was very slow going. There's not much wind until you get offshore, and that's when you pick up the trade winds. So the days went by. We were visited by dolphins a few times, and that was nice to break up the routine, but there wasn't a whole lot of marine life that we saw during the 40-day trip. Some days were just like this, dead calm. There wasn't a breath of air, so you just drift along. I actually went in the water and cleaned the bottom of the boat because it had already accumulated some barnacles and things. So you want to get rid of that to make sure that the boat can travel quickly through the water. It was a weird experience being in water that was probably about 2 miles deep and just drifting along with the boat. Now, we finally got in the area of the Galapagos. Now, I had been to the Galapagos before by plane. It's a very interesting place, but it's also quite expensive to stay there, so I decided to bypass that. The winds get very light there, so I wasn't sure whether to go north or south. So I started off going north, and the wind was still light. And at one point, I ran into another sailboat, and it was a guy that I actually knew, that I had transited the Panama Canal with, a Dutch guy. And so that was interesting to see them because there wasn't much traffic out there. So the days just kind of rolled along. Eventually we passed the equator. Now there's a tradition of drinking rum when you pass the equator, so that's a picture of us. And day after day, there were some squalls. We did some fishing. Now here's a wahoo that we caught. Bjorn he pulled it in, and it was about a 5-foot fish, and it fed us for a long time. But you can only keep stuff in the refrigerator for so long. So first of all, it had to be cut up and filleted. And so that's kind of a chore on the deck because it's very slippery. You have to be really careful. But eventually we got the meat all cut up and put away in the refrigerator. And here you see Bjorn just posing with the fish. And he also cooked a lot of the fish because we had so much left. Here he's making a pizza out of the wahoo. That was a good way. And Bjorn was a pretty good cook. He liked to bake, and I had an oven, so that worked out well. This is another fish, a blackfin tuna that we ate for a while. This is an unusual fish called a cutlass fish. You don't usually see them. They're they tend to be in deep offshore waters. They're a pelagic type of a fish, but they're not very good to eat. But so Bjorn just took a picture of him taking a bite, and then we threw it over. So the days went on. It's said that sailing is a long periods of boredom interrupted by periods of abject fear, but there weren't too many of those, fortunately. Now, when we got close to French Polynesia, we put up 2 foresails, the blue and the white, and this is called a wing-to-wing configuration. It's for going straight downwind, because that's what we were doing. So that must be the sun setting, because we're going due west, and the trade winds, of course, are straight behind you. Now, this is the first sight of the Marquesas in French Polynesia, and it was a very welcome sight. It was early in the morning. Here's Bjorn taking a picture of the bay they were about to enter, and here we are after 40 days at sea, feeling very tired. This is the beautiful bay. The island is called Hiva-o, and there were quite a few boats in the harbor. It was quite calm inside, and so it was nice to be able to talk to people. There's my boat, kind of dead center with the yellow kayak. Now, these are the people that I met. The couple on the left are the people that I saw on the sailboat out in the ocean, and the couple on the right are the people that I helped get through the Panama Canal, and they also helped me when it was my turn to go through. Here again is the harbor, really beautiful, secluded harbor. And I went down to immigrations the next day. This is the area of immigrations, and you can see it's very scenic. There are some old rock walls. There are stone carvings everywhere in the Marquesas, and they are usually very old, and they put them on display. Now, this is a sailor that I met, I think the second day. His name is Dan, and we did a bunch of things together. We did a hike, a couple of hikes, and we went around in the car that we rented, and we also did some sailing together. But the first day, our legs, of course, were very weak from staying, so we hiked up to this hotel that had a really nice pool with a beautiful view of the bay, and across the way was this mountain. So we're sitting in this pool and just relaxing and just talking about our voyages. Dan was a solo sailor, and we looked across at this mountain, and we decided that it would be a good idea to exercise our legs by climbing up to the top of it, because there is a trail. The trail is pretty rough, but we figured that would be a good way to get back in shape. Now, here we are on the side of the mountain. You can see the bay that my boat is in, and you can see that the fog is kind of settling. At first, there wasn't much there wasn't much fog, but eventually it got to be more moist and got pretty dense, and the trail was hard to follow. Here we are at the top. Unfortunately, there wasn't any view because of all the clouds, but you can see we were pretty tired by the trip. It was very strenuous. So the next day we rented a vehicle and we drove to the north shore of Hiva-o, and it was really nice. It reminded me a lot of Hawaii, where I lived for about 10 years. It's very volcanic, and you just drive along, and there are lots of little bays and things like that. And so we were just kind of sightseeing. I believe his brother was with us. He flew out to see his brother, to see Dan. And so yeah, we just went along and checked it out. Then we left Hiva-o to go across a short strait to an island called Ta'a, and here we are going into Ta'a, and actually this is Hiva-o. This is the next island that we went to. It's actually called Nukuhiva, and so we rented a car again. We drove to the other side. You can see how jagged the scenery is. It's of course it's volcanic, so it's very sculpted, and a lot of spectacular landforms. There's a nice beach on the north shore that we went to. we're just kind of there are some restaurants there. It was really nice. An old Catholic church, very typical of French Polynesia, with the two steeples, and of course the jagged mountains. And then we went to some ruins. Now, throughout the Marquesas, there are all of these ancient native stone platforms, and these are called marae. And they're the Polynesians were excellent stone workers, so their temples and things like that have survived many hundreds of years. So we sort of took a look at that for a while. Then we visited a park where tikis, big stone tikis, were located, and this is some of the stone platforms. Here's one of, I think, the largest stone tiki in the world, probably in Polynesia. And there were lots of different types, usually depicting animals or warriors and kings and so forth. This one, I believe, the head had been removed, but they put it back on its shoulders, and so that was pretty interesting. And we just, again, we looked around and visited the north shore of the island, and this is actually back at getting towards the anchorage in the main town. And so there were stone statues there as well, and this is the anchorage in the background with the stone statue. Here you see the bay during some rainfall, and of course these stone statues are pretty much everywhere. This is an interesting one. I think it's a couple of gods or some kind of animal type god. And so that was the end of our trip through Hiva-o and Nuku Hiva. So I'll be continuing these videos in a little bit. I'm going to make another one which shows the rest of the Marquesas, and then traveling on to Tahiti and the Society Islands. So if you like this video, please subscribe, and I will post another one pretty soon.